Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we are going to be answering some of our biggest questions ahead of NFL Week 3, but first, we're going to react to last night's Thursday night football game, where the San Francisco 49ers just kept on humming, blowing out the New York Giants, who have looked very questionable so far, but the Niners have been consistently stellar, dating back to last season, particularly once Brock Purdy took over. So, what did you take away from this game for the Niners?
Well, Carson, we can start with the offense. The Niners' offense is just a work of art. It's so nuanced with the pre-snap motion that we see, the deception that they use. Virtually every snap, it's a quarterback's heaven, if you must. You know, you have Kyle Shanahan calling plays. You have arguably the best skill talent in the game. And you have a young quarterback's best friend, a rock-solid running game. In this one, 39 carries for 149 yards. Use Chuck in motion all game, blowing up holes. This offensive line is one of the best in football, too. And they were really able to just continue drives, keep them alive, get the clock going. They dominate in time of possession in this one, too. And that's something that you just can't stop. You know, regardless of the play of quarterback Brock Purdy, who is still undefeated in regular season starts. He's 8-0 now. This really is an optimal situation. Again, one of the best offensive lines in football, maybe the most skill talent of any guys in football, and arguably the best offensive play caller in football, and Kyle Shanahan too. And they really show out, especially Deebo Samuel. You have no Brandon Ayuk in this game, Carson, and Deebo just eats, man. You get a play-action fake to McCaffrey. Purdy hits Deebo on a crossing route for 30 yards. He breaks off 4 tackles. You have another play where they're in the single back. Purdy hits Deebo on a slant for 20 yards. He needs 3 guys to bring him down. He drags his defenders another 10 yards. George Kittle in this game, 7 catches for 90 yards. A ton of stuff where he's just in the flat and goes and makes something happen with his own legs and stiff arms. McCaffrey, 119 total yards and a TD in this one. And Kyle Juszczyk, I just want to give another shout-out to him, man. Such an elite blocking weapon, the way they use him. He's really underrated and just one of the best utility guys in all of football. And that's what I want to hammer home here, dude, is I really didn't feel like Brock Purdy played even a good game. Purdy has 310 passing yards in this one. 215 of those 310 yards were after the catch. I mean, I think of one drive in this game. There are 2 screenplays that go for 47 yards on 2 third downs that end in a touchdown. I mean, literally the Giants just give it to him. You know, I noticed the broadcast Herb Street goes, they're letting him settle into this game. Yeah, I can't think of a better way of settling into a game. You hit Deebo and McCaffrey on, I mean, literally little out routes that go for 30 yards. Purdy did not play a great game, but he's in an optimal situation. I think he had 3 really good throws in this one. All of them were corner routes, I noticed. Like, outside of those corner routes, not a tremendous game, but he hits Ronnie Bell in the bucket. The pressure comes off of the edge. He notices it immediately. Hits Bell in the corner on that corner route. McCaffrey, another corner route later in this game. Deebo, too. Purdy just drops it in the bucket for all those guys, and that's where I think that Purdy really thrives. Again, in a situation like this, with an elite play caller, with an elite offensive line, with elite skill talent basically everywhere, you don't need a guy with a rocket arm. You don't need a guy that can extend plays and make magic happen. You just need a guy who can execute and, you know, make plays at the right time. Purdy's processing, I thought, was pretty great in this game. His awareness, that's kind of all I have to write home about. But I don't think that's where we had him, Carson. You know, I've noticed that because he continues to win, he gets elevated into maybe these fringe top 10 conversations. I think Purdy's pretty mid, and he showed it in this one. He doesn't do anything above and beyond, but he executes. He gets his ball. He gets balls to his playmakers, and he doesn't put the ball in too much trouble in this one. There were a few throws where I thought, you know, maybe there's a turnover coming. It doesn't. The Niners' offense is just going to keep humming. That was what I was most impressed with, the way they didn't turn the ball over, the way they kept drives going, and how much their skill talent really dominated in this game. For me, Carson, through 3 weeks, I know that I want to see San Francisco play against some real contenders. Maybe this is jumping the gun because we're only 3 weeks in. I feel like the Niners are my number 1 Super Bowl contender through 3 weeks, man. I've just been so impressed with how this offense has operated, all the talent here, and the defense, too. We'll get to that in a minute, but the offense blew me away. Again, nothing really special, just their guys executing and their skill guys dominating.
Well, I do think it's worth noting that the San Francisco 49ers have won 15 straight games in which they have actually had a quarterback. Like the Eagles NFC Championship game, I don't know what you can take away from that. They could not throw the ball, but they are fantastic, and they have as reliable an offensive formula as anyone because it doesn't rely on outstanding creation from the quarterback position, and they are so loaded across the board. Obviously, very strong on the line, a dominant run game, excellent scheming consistently, and you mentioned the brilliance of the weapons. Like, I think Purdy is good. I would not have him top 10, but I think he does a good job of limiting mistakes. I think he's accurate. I think he throws with good timing. And so he is a generally good captain of this offense. But I don't know that there's a better group of weapons in terms of not even requiring like big throws downfield all the time where they're creating separation. This is the best yard after catch receiving core in the league, and this has been a talking point for some time, but legitimately, I mean, Devo has to be up there for the best yak receiver in football. Ayuk is pretty damn good. McCaffrey is the best receiving running back, especially in terms of his ability to make dudes miss in space and create after the catch. And Kittle's up there for the best yak tight end. So it's just a truly fantastic situation for a guy who is a good decision maker, who is going to limit mistakes, and who can just sort of guide the ship. And that's what Brock Purdy has done really well. But I just don't know who's really going to stop this because there's not a weakness to attack. And I'm not saying that the Niners are invincible, but they absolutely have to be firmly in the top tier. And yeah, they haven't played the best competition yet. And the Rams game was relatively close, but they have eviscerated the Steelers and the Giants. And obviously the opposite side of the ball, it's as talented a defense as there is in football. And I think that we've seen that this is a good pass rush, maybe not among the absolute league's elite, but the addition of Javon Hargrave, he has already had an impact. It's just a stacked football team, incredibly well coached. They play largely mistake-free, and they're going to continue to dominate this regular season and absolutely be one of the bona fide Super Bowl contenders. But it feels like the Giants maybe showed us more in this game because this is a team that made the playoffs last year, actually won a playoff game, and people had some hopes for. I thought that they could be a 9-win team again, given some of their additions in the offseason. And then it was a brutal first game. It was a very ugly first half against the Cardinals that they managed to scrape a win out of. And now they get handled again in this game. So how concerned or how out are you just flat out on the Giants now?
I haven't really been in on the Giants, and the primary focus has been Daniel Jones. I know I was very early on this. I mean, I've been saying this for about a year now, and I said this leading up to the season that I thought Daniel Jones was a bottom 5 quarterback in the NFL. I don't feel that way now. I think he's probably a bottom 10 quarterback in football, but it's compounded by the fact that, the New York Giants paid this guy $40 million, and to me, that was the biggest issue of it all, right? The guys that you pay $40 million to either need to be high-end game managers who can make throws downfield, who can limit mistakes, or they need to be genuine elevators who are going to lead some of the best offenses in football. So, Daniel Jones against the 49ers, great defense, right? This is a real test. One of the best defenses in football. You were without Saquon Barkley. You were down a couple of offensive linemen, right? This is a game where, yes, it's a tough situation, but for a $40 million quarterback, this should still be a game where you put your offense in a position to compete, to maybe win the game. And frankly, Daniel had 2 plays in this game where I was like, wow, that was a good play, Daniel. For a $40 million quarterback, there were 2 plays where I went, wow, that was good. One of them was where he just tossed the ball out of bounds when he got sacked. The only other one I was actually really impressed with. It was the second drive of the game, 2nd and 6. You got Gary Brightwell in the backfield with him. Jones scrambles out of the backfield. 2 linebackers are on Brightwell as he rolls out. Fred Warner and the other linebacker slide down to try to go and sack Daniel Jones. Manipulates them both to sliding down. Opens up the easy passing lane for Brightwell. That was really the only play where I saw Daniel create something, and I was like, wow, that's an amazing play. Now, I do want to cut him a little more slack in this game specifically. Darren Waller couldn't catch a cold. Numerous drops, including an interception that bounced literally right off of his hands. But everything else was a check down. And like I said, this is the reality of the situation where your receivers can't create separation, where you have no Saquon Barkley, where you have backup offensive linemen, and you have a less than mid quarterback, frankly. I don't think that Jones is even a high-level game manager. The high-level game managers, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, I would even take over Daniel Jones.
This guy.
I wouldn't even call him a high-level game manager. I would just call Baker a game manager. But again, Baker, I am still taking over Daniel Jones. I thought the contract, Carson, was a misstep at the beginning, and I still think it's a misstep. And here's something that, again, I want to make a point of. In the modern NFL with the salary cap, you see two ideologies with what you have to do and how you build out your offenses. You're either the San Francisco 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles, where you have stacked offensive lines that you can pay with elite skill talent and a rookie contracted quarterback. Or you give a quarterback $40 million and you kind of sacrifice the rest of the talent that you have outside of your QB. So what I'm saying is, if you're going to go all in on a quarterback, a $40 million a year kind of guy, you have got to have complete faith in him to elevate everyone else around him. And if you don't, frankly, you're screwed. I'm not going to say the word I wanted to there. We're going to try to keep it professional today. You're screwed. And that's what the Giants feel like they're at. Because, again, the Niners, rookie QB, all this talent around him, he doesn't have to elevate these guys. He just has to execute. When you're paying a guy $40 million, you are asking him to take everyone up a notch and carry the offense. Frankly, that is something that Daniel Jones is not equipped to do. And we're going to see that, I feel like, regardless of the health of the guys around him. I don't think Daniel Jones is a $40 million a year kind of quarterback, and I don't think he's an elevator of talent like that. So I think it's a misstep, and I think we're going to continue to see that play out the rest of this year.
Yeah, he's certainly not a $40 million quarterback, and it looks like he has legitimately regressed from last year, and he is not in a good offensive situation. He does not have a good line in front of him. The weapons in the receiving game, I thought, would be improved. They are certainly not good, and in this game, he doesn't have Saquon and a running game to lean on whatsoever. So he's sort of fighting uphill. But at the same time, we have seen some of the signature mistakes and turnovers come back that bit him so much in his first 2 years that he was able to limit more last year. And he has these moments. He has games where he is able to actually show you some higher end stuff, where he is pushing the ball downfield, making big time throws. We saw it in the second half against the Cardinals. We saw it in a couple games down the stretch last year against a terrible Minnesota defense are the two that stand out. But when he can blend that with the impact he can make with his legs, you have a guy who can be a pretty damn good quarterback for a game. But he is wildly inconsistent. 2 of his 3 games this year, he has been awful. And ultimately, he's a well below average starter. I thought after last year that he was like a mediocre starter, probably slightly below average. But I think you're right in putting him in that bottom 10. And I think you are also absolutely right about the trend that we are going to see league-wide, because it felt like for a time there was a consensus that with how crucial the passing game is in today's NFL, being the foundation of almost every great offense, you couldn't really overpay for a good quarterback. But we have seen some disastrous contracts. Jimmy G for the Niners being one of the original sins here. But now you're looking at teams that are paying historic money to Deshaun Watson, who looks like a below-average starter right now. Russell Wilson, who looks like a mediocre starter right now. Derek Carr got a massive contract that I do not think is going to age well, especially given that he will very, very likely have regressed by the end of it. And you are limiting what you can do with your position talent elsewhere. And what we've seen, it feels like to me, is that there's not necessarily such a massive gap in talent between a lot of these guys outside the top 10. Now, there are dudes who are capable of making good decisions and not turning the ball over, and then there are guys who are prone to just making boneheaded plays. But you do see what a guy like Brock Purdy can do with a great offensive mind, with great skill position talent. Tua, I think, is legitimately good, but he is certainly enhanced to like elite production by great skill position talent, great offensive scheming. So it feels to me like we are seeing a separation between the true elite and then just a tier of quarterbacks that's maybe more replaceable than we initially thought. And it is the most important position, and you certainly want to invest in it. But Daniel Jones is just not one of those guys. Daniel Jones is somebody who you could replace with some guy on a rookie contract, and I just don't think the offense, which, by the way, is awful, would take that much of a hit. Maybe if you put Danny Dimes in a great offensive system with great talent, he would be more productive. But that's my point. He's not worth investing in by himself. And I do wonder if we're going to see teams get more tentative to shell out that big money at the quarterback position, because it's exactly what we talked about with the Bosa signing. Everybody was freaking out about that sort of historic money for a defensive player. But we asked point blank, would you rather have Nick Bosa on that contract or Daniel Jones on that contract? And you would rather have a reliably elite player at probably the second most important position in football than you would a thoroughly mediocre and now looking even worse player at the most position in quarterback, because he's just not a difference maker whatsoever. In 2024 through 2026, he's got a top 10 cap hit in the league. That is just devastating, because I don't see the path. And all of his production last year and the improved efficiency and limiting mistakes more, outside of what he can do with his legs, you got to give a lot of the credit to Brian Daboll and just his offensive mind and ability to improve any quarterback, likely. So I want to play a quick game with you before we move on. You already answered one of these questions, but I want to do a little Daniel Jones would you rather. So Baker was one name that I had down here. You would rather have Baker Mayfield than Danny Dimes.
It's not even a thought for me. The awareness, the feel for the game, I know this is the stereotypical thing with Baker. The dog. I don't get a dog in DJ. I want the dog. I think Baker has the dog. I don't think DJ does.
Baker has certainly been better through 2 games this year. Danny was certainly better over last year, though. Right now, Baker's playing better. I don't think you can deny that. Okay, what about Mac Jones?
I was having this debate before the show. Are we in? Now, let me ask you this. Are we including contracts in on this?
No, just in a vacuum, who's a better football player?
In a vacuum, I'll take Daniel Jones. Scrambling upside. I think they're similar arm talents. They're both kind of check down merchants with not a lot of talent around them. I'll take DJ because of the scrambling upside.
I think that Mac is a better thrower of the football. I think he's a better decision maker. I don't like either of them, but again, I would say this year he has looked better. Okay, what about Sam Howell?
You know what? I'm going to give Sam a little time because we've only actually gotten 3 weeks of football, including Week 18 versus the Cowboys, to really get a gauge on Sam. I like Sam a little more. To me, he's like Mitch Trubisky with like awareness. And I know that's not saying a whole lot, but I still like Howell a little more. Howell to me has more cojones. Like he rifles the ball in the middle of the field. He's got the cojones to go ahead and throw it, to do that. DJ to me doesn't really try to push the ball downfield as much. Howell does put the ball in precarious positions. I don't like that. This is certainly a mid-off. I'll give it to Sam Howell in this one.
Yeah, well, any compelling question has to be a mid-off. Anybody who's good, you're going to take over Danny Dimes. Yeah, I do like that Howell stands in the pocket, hangs in there, and is willing to take hits and make throws downfield. And I do think that he's more accurate, and he's a better decision maker. So he doesn't have the same upside of Danny Dimes' best game, probably because of what he can do with his legs. But so far, he's been the more consistently solid quarterback, and I don't know if that's a cop-out, but it's true. I mean, Danny has been the epitome of inconsistency, and it's been more bad than good through 3 weeks for sure. All right, what about Justin Fields? Last one.
Give me Fields. I know that sounds ridiculous through 2 weeks, and I know a lot of people are out. I'm not a particular fan of Fields throwing the ball. I do feel like a lot of this has to do with situation, though, when it comes down to Fields.
But Danny's not in a good situation whatsoever.
Danny's not in a good situation either, but at least he has an offensive mind that can scheme up things and that at least can open up the field. I feel like Fields is in quarterback hell.
Yeah, I think I would take Danny. I think that he has shown us way more as a thrower of the football. He has at least had big-time games there. I think that Justin Fields looks awful right now. I think his pocket feel, his awareness, his ability to work through his progressions, read the field, his accuracy. It just all looks bad outside of his pure athleticism. It all looks really, really bad. So I would definitely take Danny there. But neither one are guys who I would want to invest in long term. And we got to talk about the Bears, Logan, because they are a disaster right now. All the drama of this week. Their defensive coordinator, Alan Williams, resigns after week 2. Justin Fields comes out and makes some sort of disparaging comments about the coaching staff. It's just an all-around shit show. So who do you blame most for Chicago being in this place?
Well, I want to say I think this has a lot to do with residual dysfunction from the franchise. It just seems like this is what Chicago deals with every year. Like you mentioned, defensive coordinator resigns, DJ Moore. I don't know if you saw that mic'd up clip. Somebody on the sideline goes, "They're not using you properly." And DJ Moore goes, "Yeah, I know." Not really what you want to hear. I would say who's most to blame is whoever's coaching up Justin Fields or is in his ear right now, honestly. He himself, like you mentioned, suggested that coaching could be holding him back, but it seems like the kid is broken, man, and I really feel for Fields, especially when it comes to quarterback play. Like last year, I think we saw there's a couple quarterbacks we can point to that we've seen a steady drop in confidence, and confidence is such a big aspect in everything, in daily life. As a normal human being doing tasks that make you feel good, your confidence is going to gradually grow over time. You're going to get better just inherently. It's not a placebo effect. It's real. When you're more confident in yourself, you're going to do better at everything virtually. Russell Wilson has a bad year last year. You see his confidence dwindle. His body language reflects that in the presser. Carson Wentz is another guy that I think we saw over time with his struggles. His confidence dwindles. You see his body language. Him talking in the presser doesn't look good. Justin Fields, to me, is another guy that you can chalk up to that just looks dejected, demoralized. His confidence is shot. And again, at the quarterback position, that is the most important part where you need to be confident in yourself. And so that, I think, is a big, big issue. He's not confident in himself making reads and making decisions on the field, but I also think that this offense is just not tailored to what Justin Fields does great. One, I think Fields himself needs to make quicker reads. His 2.8 seconds snap to throw is the highest in the NFL right now. But again, there's no designed runs here. It seems like the coaching staff is telling him, no, don't run first. When your first or second progression isn't there, don't scramble. Try to stick in the pocket and see if you can make something happen. That's not tailoring your offense to what this guy does well. He is one of 3 quarterbacks in NFL history to rush for 1,000 yards in a single season. He still has the record for the second most rushing yards in a single season by a quarterback. This season, he has 62 rushing yards on 13 attempts. That is atrocious for a guy that is his best skill set as a quarterback. I need to see more designed runs. I need to see a heavier reliance on the running game, point blank period, where you can open up play actions, RPOs, option style plays for him to succeed. Prime example, take a look at what they've done with Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis through 2 games with designed runs. Without their primary starter even. This is with Zach Moss and Deion Jackson through 2 games, and they've been a successful, at least average offense. Do that with Fields. Lean into what he does well. I mean, look at the best offenses in the league, Carson. Tua Tagovailoa. You give him all this speed, a great offensive line. You tell him, I need you to execute and make the throws that you can make, Tua, and the other guys are going to take you up a notch. Bang, you do that. Lamar Jackson, through his first years in the NFL, we're going to run design runs. We're going to be a run-heavy offense. We're going to lean into your legs. Now that Lamar has developed as a good enough passer, they're telling him, drop back, make your progressions. If they're not there, run the ball, right? Jalen Hurts, another rushing quarterback. We're going to lean into what you do well. To me, this is not the right ideology about this offense. I get what the Bears are trying to do. They want him to improve as a pocket passer. But you're handicapping your offense and you're handicapping Fields to what he doesn't do well. I mean, damn it, dude. Run a play action for Fields. Can you give him a rollout where the line moves with him? On top of that, this isn't an optimal situation. This is a bad running game. This is a bad offensive line. There are bad skill talent. Chase Claypool's an idiot. The Bears just stink. And again, Carson, I know you tweeted this out the other day. I talk about the residual dysfunction. You talk about this is a team that franchise-wise has never been able to figure it out at the QB position. The quarterback with the most career passing yards in this franchise, Jay Cutler, 23,000. Single-season passing yards record holder is shout-out Eric Kramer, 3.8 thousand. That's embarrassing. The most career receiving yards for this franchise is Johnny Morris with 5,000. Like, they've just never been able to figure out QB or wideout. I don't know why. It just still seems to be lingering. The bottom line is, if Fields is going to be their guy, they need to lean into what he does well, or I don't know if the Bears win a football game this year, man.
I agree. They are not playing to Fields' strength, and he specifically said that he feels that he's been playing more robotic and attributed that to him having to overthink some stuff as a product of coaching and what they are emphasizing this year. And I do think that we have seen them completely turn down the designed runs, emphasize trying to turn him into a pocket passer more. Last year, his pass to run ratio was under 2-1. This year, it's 5-1. He is throwing the ball 5 times as much as he is running it. He attempted 21 passes per game last year. This year, he's attempting 33 per game. He's already thrown more passes in each of the 2 games this year than he did individually in any game last year. And that would be a good approach, trying to make him less reliant on his rushing ability and pure athleticism if he were any good as a pocket passer. But you make the comparisons to Hurts and Lamar and how their development trajectory was handled. He's not in the same stratosphere to either of them as a passer, nor is he compared to them when they were at this stage in year 3. Like, the man is just everything that we've talked about, his ability to read the field, his pocket feel, his processing, his accuracy, it's all been horrible. And there's one thing that made him even a respectable starting quarterback last year, and it was the fact that he's a generationally great running talent. I would say legitimately up there for Lamar as the most dangerous pure rushing quarterback ever. He was averaging almost 100 rushing yards per game in the second half of last season. So to try to steer him away from that is absolutely to screw him. And yeah, he still doesn't have a great line, and he doesn't have great skill position talent, but it has improved, and yet he looks significantly worse than last year, where it was already sort of on the fringe of, do we commit to him or do we look to other options? Right now, I am pretty out on Justin Fields. I think by year 3, this lack of processing, this limitation as a thrower of the football is deeply concerning. But I also think you have to blame Eberflus. I think you have to blame Ryan Poles, because I don't think that this roster has been effectively built up. I think the Roquan Smith trade to then replace him with Tremaine Edmonds on a big contract, who is simply an inferior linebacker, not a good move. They still haven't added an impact pass rusher, and that unit still sucks. None of their most highly paid players are all that close to elite. I mean, it's Edmonds, and then it's DJ Moore, who is a very good receiver, but I don't think you would put in the top 10. Cody Whitehair, Eddie Jackson. It's just like, where is the single legitimate star on this roster? They invested a lot of cap this year, and they just haven't added that sort of talent. And then I do think trading the number 1 pick to Carolina got them great value. They got the number 9 pick. They got another first. They got a second out of it, and they got DJ Moore. But that trade really makes sense if you feel that Justin Fields is your guy. If you don't, well, then use that pick on a quarterback, because that's as valuable a resource as there is. And instead, they chose to try to put the right pieces around Fields, and that just doesn't look like the right decision right now. So nothing has really gone right. I don't think that they've invested in the right people. I don't think Fields has progressed as they would hope. They're just a flat-out bad football team. And I thought that maybe we could see some progression from Fields and some of the talent added to this defense. They could be a 6 or 7 win team, and I really don't think so, man. I think they are going to be right up there for the worst team in football, again, just like last year. And this time, maybe they do hold on to that number 1 pick. And maybe they do take Caleb Williams. Or if it's not him, maybe they do invest in the quarterback position, because I just think they have to. If Fields remains at this level, that is not a franchise quarterback. I know the situation is bad, but in a vacuum, he has been awful.
I just disagree. I don't disagree
Really?
about your points about Fields. I disagree about drafting a quarterback. Now, I want to say this. I think Ryan Poles has been one of the worst general managers in football since taking over. You didn't even mention his second-round pick trade to Chase Claypool, which was effectively a late first-rounder. He gives up the 32nd overall pick, which the Steelers used to take Peasy Jr. for Claypool. Let me tell you this about the Steelers. If Mike Tomlin is shopping someone, that is a player that you do not want. Mike Tomlin does not give up on football players. If he is trading someone away, that is because they are not good. They are not about ball. But where I come down on the Bears front, Carson, I don't want Caleb Williams to go to Arizona or Chicago. I just think that those are two spots that are not ready to contend. And again, if you're going to spend that high capital on a QB, I think you need to be ready everywhere else on your football team. Offensive line, wideouts, defense. I think that obviously it's not always going to be that. You want to take the best talent on board, but I just think that if the Bears take Caleb Williams, he's in a different class than Justin Fields. I want to make that be known. I think Caleb Williams could step in and has the potential to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL one day. I'm saying that before he's even drafted, right? I think he's got that special kind of ability. I just think these are the two worst situations in football. You don't have an offensive mind that knows what he's doing. You don't have an offensive line. You don't have great receiving talent. I think Arizona and Chicago ruin any quarterback that come into town because they are just simply not able to contend. That being said, if I'm the Bears and I get that number one pick, I'm not passing on Caleb Williams. Whoever has the number one pick should not pass on Caleb Williams. It's arguably the worst quarterback situation in football, though.
Here's what I would say. I feel like you're almost viewing this from the perspective of protecting Caleb Williams. The reality is whoever has the number one pick is going to take him, and that's not a spot that you trade out of, especially because, I mean, they have the assets now, right? They got the additional picks in the DJ Moore number one pick trade. If they can't build a competent roster with the assets they have, and it doesn't really look like Ryan Poles can, then that is just their own disease. But independent of that, you have to take the best player on the board when you have such an unconvincing option at quarterback right now. I wouldn't be excited for Caleb Williams, but I'm damn sure the Chicago Bears would be excited and they would take him, because you can't just keep saying, well, let's trade out again and let's continue to accumulate talent. You got to take the generational talent at the most important position. But it is disappointing that we are even talking about them in that conversation, that we are talking about Fields as being that replaceable, because last year was obviously ugly, but there was a bit more cause for optimism down the stretch than there has been through a couple weeks this year. We are back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on the NFL action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw $5 down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner.
And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September.
Football's more fun when you're in on the action, so download the app now and sign up with code NERDS. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, with code NERDS. The crown is yours. Let's talk about some teams that are off to better starts, but maybe haven't convinced us yet. Out of all the 2-0 teams, Logan, who do you think is the most fraudulent?
I'm going to go with the Washington Commanders. There's a lot of teams here that I don't have a whole lot of faith in. I don't have a whole lot of faith in the Saints. I don't think they're legit. I don't think the Bucs are like legit, real super contenders. I like the Bucs a lot, but I think they're in a different tier. I don't think the Falcons are. Okay, so basically the NFC South I think is fraudulent, but I'm going to go with the Commanders as my number one, and it's primarily because of Sam Howell. Now, Howell has had flashes, like we mentioned earlier in the DJ comparison. I would take him over Daniel Jones, and he's had some moments. That rollout in the red zone against the Cardinals, he hits Brian Robinson for a TD. He's had a lot of throws over the middle into the corners of the field that I've really liked, where you got to have faith in yourself, and you got to have faith in your arm to make these throws. These are bullets over the middle, standing in the pocket against big guys. But Howell's put the ball in a lot of danger thus far. He threw a wobbly interception versus the Cardinals. There was another sack fumble that got recovered for a TD. There's been probably 4 to 5 other plays through 2 games where I've been like, wow, that could have been a bad turnover. I don't really think he does anything elite. It's a pretty simple offense. He's checking the ball down or throwing an in, a slant, a lot of checkdowns. He's not a great athlete. He's kind of evasive, but he doesn't have a crazy live arm. So, yeah, I mean, I think Mitch Trubisky with awareness is a pretty good comp in terms of athleticism, in terms of arm talent. But I think Howell can read the field a little bit more. They just really haven't wowed me. I mean, they've battled two pretty bad teams, in my opinion. They were down 16-10 in the third quarter to the Cardinals. They end up eking that one out. They're losing to the Broncos for most of this game. They ended up making a second-half comeback. I just think being down to two really bad teams for 2 weeks isn't really inspiring a whole lot of confidence. I mean, and then the defense has been pretty mid. If this team wants to be great, this defense is not going to have to be, average. It needs to be excellent. And I just don't think this offense is going to be an upper echelon one with Sam Howell. So through 2 weeks, shout out to the Commanders for starting out 2-0. There is defensive talent I like here, but they haven't shown that they can be great. And I just don't have a whole lot of faith in Sam Howell being an above-average QB and leading an above-average offense for the rest of this season. So there's a lot of teams I don't like, but the Commanders, to me, are the most fraudulent 2-0 team.
I agree, and I don't know that I'm quite as low on Howell. Now, I do certainly agree. Him being an above-average starting quarterback would be very surprising to me. But again, I do generally like his ability to make throws from the pocket. But coming from the number 24 scoring offense last year, obviously they have some good talent at receiver, particularly with Terry McLaurin, but they don't have even an average starting quarterback, in my opinion. Certainly not one of the play creators and elevators. They haven't been able to rely on the run game. I still view it as quite a limited offense. And then defensively, their pass rush, which we know is very talented, has looked good, but they haven't defended the run well. Russ moved the ball all over the field against them in a way that he hasn't really done to anybody else in some time. So I just think they're a very low ceiling team. And I also think that they're in a tough division where if they were better than third, I would be legitimately stunned. And that's just not a favorable situation for their continued success. And as you mentioned, their wins, I mean, they very easily could have lost to the Cardinals, man. And that's not a team that you want to be nearly losing to. Although so far, the Cardinals are 2 for 2 in terms of almost wins. But I don't think that reflects well on the teams that they've almost beaten. I would say that the team that I think is next most fraudulent out of the 2-0 bunch is probably the Saints, because I think that they have really struggled to beat two very unimpressive teams to me, like the Commanders, the Titans, and the Panthers. And their offense is just brutal. They're 24th in yards per rush, can't rely on the run game, and they don't have Kamara right now, obviously, but he's really regressed as a runner the last couple years. We've seen his efficiency drop off from elite up towards 5 yards per carry to below average, more like 4 yards per carry or just a tick above that. And Taysom Hill is their leading rusher right now, which is just ridiculous. And they're legitimately lining him up as tailback, bro. It is so weird how they use him. But I looked this up the other day. He has 42 career touchdowns, Logan. Like, it's not Sean Payton anymore, but when he could, that man wanted to get him a touchdown. They still use him, though, in a lot of those red zone packages. So good for him, man. Good for him. He gets in the end zone, and that's got to be pretty fun. But I don't want him as my leading rusher. And Jamal Williams, love the guy too. Awesome personality. He's in the Nerd Sesh intro, but he's just not a complete runner of the football. He's really useful in those short yardage, goal line situations, but they've already got Taysom Hill, who's the best running back in the league in those situations. So I don't like the run game. Carr just hasn't looked good, and his 2 picks have been horrible, and they do have good receiving talent, but he's not producing right now, and there's very little explosiveness to this offense. So I like the defense, but they've had some trouble stopping the run through the first 2 weeks, which they had trouble with last year. I think it's a good, not a great defense and a limited offense. But I would say the same things about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have looked better. They've had 2 more impressive wins. I mean, not great ones, right? They beat the Bears in what was mostly a competitive game, and they barely beat the Vikings. I think their defense is a little bit better, but I'm worried about the offense because I still think this is one of the worst rushing attacks in football. They're averaging under 3 yards per attempt through a couple games. And I just don't really believe in Baker sustaining this level of football, this level of mistake-free football. I mean, he's made some big throws and really found a connection with Mike Evans. I just think based on the level we have seen from him historically, without being able to rely on a good run game here, I'm still concerned about him. I do think that I sold the Bucs short, but I don't view them as a legitimate playoff team. Somebody's got to make it out of the NFC South, and I think that the Saints, the Bucs, and the Falcons are all in those conversations, but I do think that I buy the Falcons the most right now. All right, let's flip that question on its head, Logan, and talk about a couple of 0-2 teams, because the most surprising teams in that category right now are the Chargers and the Bengals. Who do you think is in more trouble?
I think it's got to be the Chargers. Now, I am somewhat concerned about Cincy, but they've started in this hole before, and Joe Burrow's calf worries me a little bit, but they're not going to put him on injured reserve is what it's sounding like. So to me, if Burrow is out there, that still gives Cincy the best chance to go out there and win football games. And I just expect this offense to find a rhythm of some sort soon enough. The offensive line has regressed a little bit. I don't think the defense is what it was in years previous, but there's just a different level of faith I have in Cincy because of Burrow, because of the reputation that they've earned themselves over the past few seasons. That's the same reason I'm going with the Chargers as the team that I'm concerned about, because of the reputation that they've earned themselves over the past few seasons. This just kind of seems like what the Chargers do, man. They lose close games that they should win every single time. I don't really understand why. This is what has happened under Brandon Staley. He was hired to fix this defense. He was the defensive coordinator with the Rams in 2020. They were number 1 in points per game and yards allowed per game. And their defense has consistently sucked. Their defense sucks again this year, it looks like. The explosive plays, to me, Carson, are the biggest issue. Tua lights them up for 466 yards. Waddle and Hill all over the field, burning them. Traylon Burks 70 yards downfield off a play action. And they lead the NFL in passing yards allowed through 2 weeks. They also cannot cover. Their linebackers stink. They've struggled to generate consistent pressure. It just looks like this defense is going to suck again, and we've already seen that story. They're going to win somewhere between 8 to 10 games. They're either going to make the playoffs or they're going to make it, and they're going to lose in the first round. To me, there's just no higher ceiling with the Chargers, and this was a team that I was really excited to watch this year. New receiving talent, Justin Herbert, new offensive coordinator. Look, I think the offense is going to be great. I have utter faith in Herbert and these weapons with a healthy Austin Eckler, with maybe a slightly better running game, with new weapons here. But this defense is probably going to be one of the worst 10 in football again this year. You need a complete football team. You can't just win with one side of the field. So for that reason, I just think we see the ceiling with the Chargers again this year through 2 weeks. I need the Chargers to show me that they're not the same old Chargers before I'm going to buy in.
I think that that's fair. I think that they are going to be very bad defensively. That just feels inevitable. They've really struggled in the first 2 games of the season, and as good as the Dolphins' offense just is point blank, they were just having a party against the Chargers' linebacking core and secondary, and they couldn't get pressure home. And then a very limited Titans offense was still able to have success against them. I think they're really, really bad on that end. What I will say, though, is they certainly have a better schedule than the Bengals. And through 2 games, the Bengals have looked worse. I mean, the Bengals have looked awful. And I think that there is some defensive regression here. We've talked about it before, the lack of a high-end pass rush and the loss of 2 key pieces in terms of the secondary with Jesse Bates and Von Bell. I think that Joe Mixon in the overall run game has really regressed, and it was bad last year. I think it's bad again this year. So they need Burrow in this passing attack to be consistently excellent. And if Burrow is hampered by that calf injury, maybe it's not a postseason issue, but it might be an issue for close to half of this regular season, and then you dig yourself a hole in the standings. Because to me, they want to go 4-0 over their next 4 games. And they basically have to win 3 of them because they've got the Rams, they've got the Titans, they've got the Cardinals, and then they've got the Seahawks. After that, I mean, you have the Niners, you have the Bills, you still have another 4 games against your very tough division. You got to play the Chiefs. Like, it's just the Jags. There's a lot of games against elite football teams here that right now the Bengals have looked flat out worse than. So because of my concern about the Chargers defense, I would probably say I'm more worried about them, but they just don't have to do as much. The Bengals are in a position where they have to be really consistently sharp, really good, basically for the rest of the year. And they haven't played at that level yet. But yeah, I do have more just built-in faith with them. There's no question about that. All right, let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys, Logan, because there has been no more dominant team in football through 2 weeks. They have absolutely eviscerated the two teams put in front of them. Now, some very unfortunate news for them. Trevon Diggs is out for the season with an ACL tear that he sustained in practice. But all things considered, are the Cowboys a bona fide Tier 1 undeniable Super Bowl contender?
Yeah, I think so right now. Now, I know, guys, the Cowboys and Super Bowl, they don't really go together, right? It's like, I'm going to go eat some peanut butter. Let me go eat a pickle, right? And you're just like, what? They didn't really go together, bro. The Cowboys and the Super Bowl, they don't really mesh. And again, until the Cowboys show me they can get to the conference championship game, I'm always hesitant to say that they are a legit Super Bowl contender. They need to show it in the postseason. Again, I think the Cowboys can be a great regular season team. I have no doubt about that. But right now, tentatively, I have them as a Tier 1 Super Bowl contender. I have 7 teams in my Super Bowl legit contenders right now. The 49ers, the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Dolphins are my Super Bowl contenders right now. Now, it gets a lot harder with the Diggs injury, but I still think there's a lot to like with Dallas. First, they put elite pressure on the quarterback. Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence are a ferocious pass-rushing tandem. If they can get anything out of rookie Mozzie Smith or any of the other guys up front and be a consistent run-stuffing unit, Jonathan Hankins, any of the guys up front, if they can consistently stop the ball, I think you're looking at one of the best front fours in football. The linebackers are okay. I like Van Der Esch and Clark. They're cool, but Stephon Gilmore has probably the biggest job the rest of the season. He's going to have to step up and be that number one corner. It looks like a really genius signing right now, right? Mm-hmm. You were projected to have one of the best corner tandems in football. Now you have a really good starting corner in Gilmore, but he's going to have to step up and play great. Yeah, I do. I think this offense can reach a relatively high ceiling. I think this defense can still be top 10 to top 5. They've got a great pass rush. They're still great at forcing turnovers. That's been a real key to this identity for Dallas over the past couple years. Obviously, this hinders them a little bit, but I still would have Dallas in my Super Bowl contenders hierarchy. I probably would have had them 3. Mm-hmm. Right now, I probably bump them down to 6 or 7. I think the Diggs injury is pretty big, but I would still consider them a legit Super Bowl contender.
Well, I think if you're going 7 deep, they have to be in that tier, because even with the Diggs injury, I would say they're one of the 3 most talented teams in football. Now, I would have them behind the Niners and the Eagles considering the Diggs injury. Before that, they would be right up there in terms of star talent, in terms of the strength of the entire roster, position group to position group. They are loaded, man. But this does matter because Diggs was playing really well. He'd let up 2 catches through 2 games. He'd forced a turnover, which obviously is his signature value, but I think we've seen him progress as a cover corner as well. But that's what this Cowboys defense has done so well over the last 2 years. Put insane pressure on quarterbacks and force the most turnovers in the league. And so he does hurt their ability to dominate in that formula a bit, but the pass rush is insane. They and the Eagles are just in a different tier from the rest of the league in terms of pass rush to me, and the Cowboys have been the better one through a couple games this year. But they have to be, to me, among the top 5. They are clearly more complete than the Chiefs, than the Bills, in my opinion. I do think the Ravens are a really great all-around football team, but the ability to dominate defensively with that pass rush, to rely on both a really good run game with a good line, elite running back play, and a good quarterback and good weapons in the receiving game. It's what I've been saying since the offseason. They're just a rare football team in terms of their all-around talent, but losing an elite player on the defensive end, with some of the concerns I do still have about Dak's ability to string together 4 straight damn good playoff football games, and some of my concerns about Mike McCarthy as a decision maker, as a game manager in those big time situations, they wouldn't be at the very top of my list now with this loss of one of their best players. I would still have them 3 in the NFC. But I mean, honestly, in terms of all around talent, the 3 teams in the NFC have, well, I understand that the Eagles haven't played at that level whatsoever, honestly, through 2 games. I just have that level of faith in their all around roster, given what we saw last year. But they've looked more complete than anybody in the AFC. So they do have to be in that conversation, but we'll see how they respond to this injury. I do think it matters. I think it is going to impact their defensive dominance, and I also think it's worth noting that we haven't seen them challenged by a legit offense yet. I mean, blowouts are blowouts, and that's great, but they've played the Giants and the Jets with Zach Wilson. Those are clearly 2 bottom 10 offenses. And now they have the Cardinals, who they will dominate again. And then they have the Patriots, who are not going to put up numbers on them offensively. So this defense is really, really good. But I do think through 4 weeks, it might be a bit inflated by playing really bad offenses. And then they'll start to get some tests with the Niners, the Chargers, the Eagles a couple weeks after that. And then we'll have a better sense of exactly what this team is made of. But they're damn good. There's no doubt they're damn good. All right. Let's look ahead to this weekend specifically, Logan. What game on the Week 3 slate do you think can show us the most about the teams playing in it?
I think we can learn a lot from the Steelers-Raiders game, and primarily just both of these below-average teams in the AFC. I mean, can they score points convincingly? I mean, these are teams that I don't think are talent-starved. The Raiders
Really? The Raiders?
I mean, the Raiders have Garoppolo. Yeah, I mean, Garoppolo is one of the things holding them back. Excuse me. They got Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams. I mean,
yeah, they got 2 guys.
Even with Jimmy G out there.
3. Max Crosby.
Shout out. The Raiders need to show that they have some sort of life here and can move the ball. They've been good on 3rd down, but pretty abysmal everywhere else. Jimmy G has that red zone interception. And then I'm just really looking at the Steelers, too. This is one of the worst defenses that they're going to play on this year. The Raiders consistently have one of the worst secondaries in football. They've not been able to stop the run either. Like, to me, as a Steelers fan, this has to be the game where the Steelers put up 250-plus yards offense, and that's not even crazy.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I know, dude.
I would hope so. I mean, what is this, 2002?
Right? No, this is how this offense feels. I mean, to me, I want to blow the Raiders out. I don't think that's going to happen. I just want to see consistent, sustained drives where they're converting 3rd downs, they're getting a little more vertical, a little more nuance. If the Steelers can't move the ball on the Raiders, they're not going to be able to move the ball on anybody, and that's why I'm highlighting this game. They have to get Najee going. They have to get Warren going. They have to get something going on offense. It has been – I've seen some bad stretches of Steelers offensive football. This has been the worst 2-week stretch I can remember in – let me do some quick math here. 18 years of watching this team. This is the worst 2-week stretch I can remember ever. So against a really bad defense, I want to see the Steelers just move the ball. 300 yards would be cake. 250 is the bare minimum. I'm asking you guys for a regular game from the 2006 season. That would be awesome. Can you guys show me that? Honestly, Carson, would you take the over or under of that, man? Where do you think they come down?
I'm definitely going over 250. I mean, 250 is a bad offensive game in today's NFL, man. They got 250 against the Browns.
I know, but through 2 weeks, we've got 239 and 255. Seems like a pretty solid line to me in a Canada-led offense.
But, I mean, that's the bar for being the number 31 offense in football right now, Logan. Can we shoot a little higher? Can we push for 300 against one of the worst defenses in the league? I think they can. I think they can do it. I wouldn't put them to go far above that because I think they have no explosive playability. They don't do anything well offensively. They don't scheme well. They don't run the football well. And it's been a really rough start to the year for Kenny. So, yeah, 300, maybe on the dot. And maybe it's the best offensive game of the season. But I agree with this to some extent in terms of how much it can show us, because it's like if the Steelers can't move the football on the Raiders, they can't move the football on anybody. At the same time, moving the football on the Raiders doesn't really move the needle for me.
That's fair. That's fair.
So my concerns about this Steelers offense, I don't think are going away. And I don't even know if they can be classified as concerns as much as observations of this offense sucks and is going to continue to suck. So I'm going to highlight Falcons-Lions because I think that this is a really interesting game for two teams that have given us cause for optimism, but haven't really had that outstanding performance yet. The Lions beat the Chiefs, but it was with 14 points of total offense. Kansas City looked out of sync. It was just a weird game for them, and then they followed that up with a week 2 loss. But I want to see particularly how Atlanta hangs with a more high-powered offense because I want to see this defense pushed a bit more. I do think it's a solid defense in terms of personnel. I think that it's improved, but they haven't had to face a team that's dominant like this in the trenches that can rely on a high-level run game and can also beat you through the air. And I want to see how they are able to generate stops defensively. And also if they get into a bit more of a shootout, how do they hang? Because I think that they've been a solid offense so far, but they're also a unique offense in how overwhelmingly reliant they are on the run game. And frankly, I think that Desmond Ridder is very limited as a passer. So I just saw the other day that they haven't had a wide receiver 3 catch a pass yet this year, Logan. So I want to see if it gets into more of a shootout situation and they have to push the ball downfield with a bit more urgency. Can they do that? Or is their offensive ceiling limited even if they're a very good rushing attack? And then opposite them for the Lions, I buy into this offense. It was a top 5 offense last year, and I don't really see cause to believe that they've regressed there, even if it hasn't been the most dominant games. I mean, game 1, they weren't very good. Against the Seahawks, they were really good offensively with the exception of the Goff pick 6. It was more their defense that struggled. So that's what I want to key in on. Particularly, this has been a solid run defense so far. I want to see how they do against the best rushing attack in football. Well, arguably the best rushing attack in football. And overall, I just want somebody to jump out at me a bit more. I think this is an opportunity for somebody to have that performance that says, okay, we're not in the sneak into the playoffs in a weak back end of the NFC kind of tier. We're a legitimately solid playoff team. And I think the Lions are more likely to do it because they have the potential to be an elite offense. I don't really know where the Falcons jump off the screen.
No, Carson, I think it's a really good game to highlight moving forward, especially because I think you mentioned this on the show either a week or 2 back. It seems like there's a concrete 3-team top lead here in the NFC, and there's no real distinct 4th team. I think that if the Lions dominate the Falcons, they could kind of cement themselves as the 4th best team in football. I'm not really convinced after the Seattle game that Seattle
in football or the NFC?
Excuse me, in the NFC. Excuse me. Yeah. And I think you highlight a key matchup, too. The Lions have yet to allow more than 100 yards rushing in a game this season. This is one of the best rushing attacks in football. I like what I've seen out of their middle guys. That's where Detroit was pretty soft last year. Alex Anzalone has looked awesome through 2 weeks. So if the Lions dominate this game, I would probably have them as my 4th best team out in the NFC. I have that level of faith in this offense, and then I just need to see this defense take a step up, man. If that's Aiden Hutchinson dominating, if that's them, again, stopping one of the best run units in football. But also, like you said, too, if Atlanta's struggling in this game, I need Desmond Ridder to show me something, man. Ridder has shown me 0 through the air so far through 2 weeks. I need him to show me that he can be more than just a bottom-tier game manager. I want to see some explosive plays through the air because that's what you're going to need in big spots in the playoffs. I'd like to see one of these teams emerge as a legit NFC contender.
And I will say what I want to see tested most with this Lions team is the secondary. We know that they made moves to improve there, bringing in Cam Sutton, bringing in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but they kind of got the ball moved all over the field against them through the air by Geno and the Seahawks. So Desmond Ridder's not really going to be the guy to test them there. But, I mean, hey, if there's a spot for him to find some success, maybe it is against this Lions secondary. So it's going to be an interesting week. We don't have quite as many standout games on the slate as we did in the first 2 weeks, but nonetheless, a lot to be learned. So If you enjoyed this one, the good news is that there's always more Nerd Sesh content out there. You can subscribe to the Volume YouTube page to get all of our shows with video. You can listen to the podcast across audio platforms, and you can follow us across social. TikTok is at Nerd Sesh. Instagram is the same. Twitter at Nerd_Sesh to see all of our trivia content that we do, see clips from the show there, and just stay tuned in with everything in the Nerd Sesh world. You can also buy our merch at thevolume.com. Logan's rocking the hoodie. We've got the flags behind us. We've got hats. We've got shirts. You can check all of that out at thevolume.com and at the link tree in any of our social media bios. You can also find us on Cameo through the link tree if you want any custom messages from the nerds. And you can join our Discord there to just talk football, talk basketball with us, whatever you want in our community. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.